The international cruise ship Celestia Horizon was not just a vessel, but a gigantic, shimmering mirage sailing across the boundless ocean. Its steel sides reflected the dazzling sun, and on its decks life teemed, enclosed within a golden cage of luxury. More than 2,000 passengers, hailing from all corners of the world, savored every moment, forgetting their daily grind. For them, it was paradise. 3 cascading pools, a casino with neon lights, boutiques where one could spend a fortune, a theater where applause rang out nightly, and endless rows of cabins, each promising solitude and peace. For most, it was a dream voyage, an embodiment of carefree leisure, where the only horizon was the water's surface and the glow of sunset. But for over 600 crew members, Celestia Horizon was entirely different. It was a floating mechanism working tirelessly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Behind the scenes of glittering decks and smiling waiters lay a world of strict control, iron discipline, and exhausting labor. There was no room for personal problems, fatigue, or doubt. Every movement was precise, every task meticulously scheduled, and any deviation from the timetable threatened serious consequences. The crew lived by their own rules, far from the eyes of the passengers, in a labyrinth of narrow corridors, technical compartments, and tiny cabins, more like pencil cases. Maria had been working here as a stewardess for her 3rd consecutive contract. Her hands, despite constant work, remained well kept, and her movements were precise and accurate. She was like a clock, working flawlessly, quiet, punctual, incredibly responsible. In 3 years of working on the liner, she had earned a reputation as the impeccable hand. Maria knew which cabin preferred lavender pillow spray and where strong cleaning product scents were absolutely intolerable. She remembered who left tips under a water glass and who left them under an empty coffee cup. Her phenomenal memory and attention to detail earned her respect. Colleagues from Latin America, Asia, and Europe, despite language barriers, often sought her advice. How best to scrub a red wine stain, how to quickly tidy a cabin after a wild party, or how to politely but firmly explain to a guest that their request was not part of a stewardess's duties. Maria was their unofficial mentor, their compass in the complex world of the liner. She loved her job. She loved the sense of order she brought to the chaotic world of travel. The money she earned here allowed her to pay for her younger brother's education and help her aging parents in a small town far inland. This gave her strength. Her sector partner in service was Clara, a Bulgarian woman with thick, shiny chestnut hair, always impeccably styled, and a smile that seemed to make the sun dance on the water. Clara had arrived just 2 months ago, but had already become one of them. Her infectious laughter often echoed through the crew corridors. She quickly befriended the entire crew, the Filipino cooks who shared their tastiest dishes, the Italian baristas who made her espresso a special way, even the taciturn security guards who usually kept their distance. Clara always found common ground. Her energy seemed inexhaustible. Maria couldn't say she didn't trust Clara. No, Clara was sweet, often offered help, shared chocolates and stories from her life in Varna. But in Maria's chest lived some inexplicable, barely perceptible anxiety. It seemed to her that Clara integrated too easily into the team, found an approach to everyone too quickly, as if she had a ready-made script for each. Sometimes Maria found herself thinking that Clara asked too many questions about work details, about which passengers were the wealthiest, or how the security system worked in the service areas. These were fleeting, almost intangible moments, but they left an unpleasant residue. One day Maria noticed Clara lingering too long at the administrator's desk, watching him hand out locker keys to new employees. At the time, it seemed odd, but nothing more. At the morning briefing, held in the cramped conference room for service staff, the senior service manager, Monsieur Duval, a corpulent man with an unvarying bow tie, cleared his throat and delivered bad news. His usually cheerful voice sounded muffled. "My dears," he began, nervously stroking his mustache, "we have a very unpleasant situation. Personal belongings have begun to disappear from guest cabins." A murmur ran through the room. This was unheard of for Celestia Horizon. "First a pair of earrings from cabin 305, Duval continued, consulting his notepad. Then a wallet with a substantial sum in dollars and euros from cabin 412. And this morning, he paused, as if reluctant to speak. This morning, a Canadian citizen's passport disappeared from cabin 210. A whisper of horror swept through the room. A passport? This was not just theft. It was an international incident. A frantic search was beginning on board. Duval announced that every crew member would be interrogated and their personal lockers would be searched. Maria felt her breath quicken. Her heart pounded somewhere in her throat. A staff inspection was a matter of time, and she was not mistaken. Tension mounted with each passing hour. Colleagues began to eye each other suspiciously. Smiles vanished, and the air filled with distrust. 24 hours later, as Maria was finishing her shift in the luxury sector, one of the security officers, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a stony face, approached her. "Maria," he said in a colorless voice, "you are requested to come to the service office." Maria's knees buckled. She knew why she was being summoned. There, by the row of metal crew lockers, where everyone stored their personal belongings, 3 officers and a security administrator, a man with a folder in his hands and an intense gaze, awaited her. "Open your locker, Maria," the administrator said. His tone brooked no argument. Maria, with trembling hands, entered her personal code. The numbers blurred before her eyes. The locker opened with a characteristic metallic click. For a few seconds, nothing happened. An oppressive silence reigned, broken only by the hum of the liner's engines. Then one of the officers, unhurriedly and methodically, began to examine the contents. He removed several folded towels, a couple of Maria's personal items, a simple shirt, a toothbrush, and suddenly his hand froze. He pulled out a gold bracelet, intricately woven, with small diamonds. Maria had seen such a bracelet in the description of the missing items. Then a dark leather wallet with an embossing and a passport. The passport was in the name of Jacqueline Ross, a passenger from London, whose disappearance had been announced only a few hours earlier. "This is impossible," Maria whispered, her voice barely audible. She felt the blood drain from her face. "This is not mine. I would never." The words caught in her throat. No one answered. The officers' faces were inscrutable masks. They quickly and methodically documented each find, photographing the bracelet, wallet, passport, as if they were evidence at a crime scene. Maria stood stunned, unable to move, her mind refusing to accept what was happening. She felt how differently they looked at her now. She felt it in every cell of her body. Suspicion, contempt, alienation. All her 3 years of flawless work crumbled in an instant. It seemed to her that her own locker, her personal space, had betrayed her. Later, when she was released, told to await further instructions, Maria wandered down the corridor between the service compartments, trying to comprehend what had happened. She needed to go out for fresh air to clear her head, but instead, she ran into Clara. Clara was standing in the shadows, next to the staff staircase, where there were almost never any extra eyes. Clara was fiddling with something in her hands. Maria looked closer. It was a metal key ring, very similar to a universal key. And most importantly, it was the same type of lock as her own locker, which had just been opened. Maria's heart clenched painfully. For the first time in a long time, a spark of suspicion ignited within her, sharp and cold as steel. It seemed to her that a fleeting, barely noticeable shadow of triumph flickered in Clara's eyes. Or was it just her imagination? The next morning, Maria woke not to her alarm, but to a pounding headache and a crushing sense of hopelessness, gripping her somewhere in her chest. Outside her tiny crew cabin's porthole, if it had one, the boundless ocean would have been visible, but now she saw only the walls of her room, which had become even more confined in the past hours. She was still on the team. Her name hadn't been crossed off the list, but the attitude towards her had changed drastically. Even those who used to clean decks with her, who shared laughter and fatigue, now avoided her gaze. In the dining room, usually filled with noise and liveliness, an invisible zone of alienation formed around Maria. Whispers were already circulating behind her back. Stealing from guests. Maybe not for the first time. These words, though not spoken aloud, were felt in every cell of her body, like poisoned arrows. Her impeccable reputation, which she had built for so long, crumbled to dust. The feeling of humiliation was unbearable. Clara, on the other hand, seemed the embodiment of serenity. Her laughter still chimed in the corridors, and her smile was wide and unconstrained. At lunch, as Maria tried to force down tasteless food, Clara sat beside her as if nothing had happened. She whispered, her voice full of feigned sympathy. But in Maria's eyes, there was not a drop of sincerity. "Oh, it's all nonsense, Maria, darling. People often lose things at sea. Waves, alcohol. Maybe it just got misplaced, you know. You get so tired. You might just not have noticed. Don't worry about it." Maria clenched her teeth so hard her jaw ached. Just misplaced? She knew. Things don't just appear in a personal locker. It was a pure, blatant lie. Moreover, everything in her locker was neatly arranged. Too neatly, as if deliberately placed for inspection, as if someone wanted these proofs to be found as quickly as possible. Both the jewelry, the wallet, and the passport. Everything was right on top, as if intentionally displayed. Maria felt like a pawn in someone's dirty game. Her mind was racing, trying to find an explanation, to understand who and why could have done this. All threads led to Clara. It was on this day, during her usual corridor cleaning, that Maria saw what confirmed her worst suspicions. She was walking down the service corridor that led to the crew changing rooms. Clara, thinking no one was nearby, approached a row of lockers. Maria froze around the corner, observing her through a narrow slit in the storeroom doorway. Clara took out the very metal keyring Maria had seen in her hands the day before. Clara deftly inserted it into the lock. Of her locker. It was the same locker from which the stolen items had been retrieved yesterday. Maria's heart pounded furiously. Clara quickly peered inside, rearranged something. Her movements were swift and practiced, as if she had done this many times before. And just as quickly, she closed the door, put away the keyring, and left, humming a tune. Maria couldn't believe her eyes. Indignation and panic burned in her soul. She had been framed. All of this was a carefully planned trap. She remembered that the changing rooms had old cameras that often malfunctioned. They were installed more for show than for actual control. And, as she had learned, the footage for the past 2 days had already been deleted, due to technical reasons. This couldn't be a coincidence. Clara was acting not only deceitfully, but also deliberately. She either had access to information or simply knew the system's vulnerabilities. That night, Sleep eluded her. Maria tossed and turned in her narrow bunk, her mind boiling with rage and despair. She needed proof, irrefutable proof, something that couldn't be dismissed as waves and alcohol. She still had an old smartphone that she only took with her for photos. It didn't get signal at sea, but the camera worked perfectly. It was at this moment that a plan formed in her head. It was risky, but it was the only one. She hid the phone in the upper corner of her locker, on the shelf behind folded towels, so that the camera lens was pointed at the door and the lock. She started video recording and tightly closed the lock. If Clara tampered with her locker again, it would be seen. This would be her trump card. While Maria worked in the luxury cabin zone, her mind constantly returned to the locker, to the small smartphone that was recording. Every click of a door, every rustle behind her back made her heart skip a beat. In her thoughts, only one thing: to see how it all happened, to find proof. She knew, without it, no one would believe her. Not on a liner where reputation and order were paramount, where every incident could cost a career. She had to act cautiously, without attracting attention. If Clara suspected anything, the plan would fail. Maria tried to look as usual, friendly but focused, impeccably performing her duties. She even smiled at colleagues, trying not to betray her inner tension, but each smile was difficult. When evening finally came and Maria returned to the changing room, her heart was pounding in her chest like a drum, drowning out all other sounds. Her hands trembled so much that she had to enter the code several times before the locker opened. With trembling fingers, she took the phone from its hiding place and started playback. The screen illuminated her face with a deathly pale light. On the smartphone screen, in the dim, grainy light of the changing room, an image flickered. A shelf with neatly folded towels, the corner of her crumpled uniform. Maria held her breath, listening to the barely audible sounds of the video recording. For a minute, nothing happened. Only the faint flicker of the screen and the background noise, which seemed to grow louder in her nervous anticipation. But then Clara appeared in the frame. She entered the changing room, scanning her surroundings with a quick, professional glance, like a predator surveying its territory. Convinced that no one was there, she calmly approached Maria's locker and, as if nothing were amiss, without the slightest hesitation, inserted the metal key ring into the lock. Maria pressed herself against the back of the bench, watching the screen. Every gesture of Clara's was precise, every movement confident. Clara opened the door, took a clutch bag with a monogram from her pocket, the very one whose disappearance had been announced only a few hours ago, and carefully, with almost casual precision, placed it inside, on top of the towels, trying not to disturb the other items. Then she closed the lock, checked that it was securely fastened, and straightened up. All of this took no more than half a minute. Not a single emotion was reflected on her face. No shadow of doubt, no hint of fear. Absolute cold-bloodedness. Maria watched as the traitor's breathing didn't even falter. She was like a robot executing a programmed task. The video was undeniable. It was more than convincing proof, her salvation. But how to use it? On the one hand, she could simply go to Monsieur Duval, the senior manager, and show him the recording. Here, Clara framed me. But Maria knew it wasn't that simple. Duval might believe her, but what then? A liner is a small world, with its own rules and hierarchy. There's no police in the usual sense. Here, everything is decided by the captain and his officers, and they value order and reputation above all else. And what if Clara found out she recorded her? What then? Maria was a regular stewardess. Clara had already managed to gain the support of many influential people on board. her word against Clara's, backed by influence. She had to act not just smartly, but cunningly. The next morning, Maria copied the video to a small flash drive and hid it in a tiny pendant she always wore around her neck. It was a gift from her mother, and no one ever paid attention to it. She kept the original on her phone, just in case, but knew the flash drive was her insurance. Then she went to breakfast. Clara was already sitting at their usual table, chatting merrily with the cooks. Maria sat beside her, trying to appear as casual as possible. Clara, as always, joked and pretended to be a caring colleague, her words imbued with venom. "Well, Maria, darling, haven't they kicked you out yet? See, no one's bothering you. Captain Bennett, he's fair. Maybe everything will sort itself out, and those things just turned up in some corner. People are so forgetful, you know." Maria nodded, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. She bit into a piece of toast, trying to feign indifference. "Perhaps," she said evenly, her voice surprisingly calm. "Sometimes the truth surfaces on its own, Clara, especially on the water. You can't hide from the truth here. It always finds its way to the surface." Clara froze. Her smile slipped from her face. She compressed her lips but said nothing. Her gaze, usually so open and kind, for the first time flickered with something wary, even predatory. There was something in it that Maria hadn't noticed before: cold calculation and a barely perceptible glint of malice. Maria realized that her words had hit their mark. Clara suspected something. Maria knew. Now she needed not only to prove her innocence, but also to ensure Clara no longer harmed others. This predator had to be neutralized. She decided to set a trap. A real one, with witnesses, and so that Clara couldn't wiggle out, so that she was caught red-handed, leaving no chance for justification. This was a matter not only of her reputation, but also of her principles. She could not allow evil to go unpunished. For 2 days, Maria meticulously prepared her trap. Her mind worked like a precise mechanism, planning every step, every possible outcome. She stayed up nights, replaying scenarios in her head, refining the plan. Her main task was not just to catch Clara, but to do it in such a way that her guilt was undeniable and the evidence impeccable. She understood that one video might not be enough. Clara could claim it was edited or faked. Other testimonies, other clues, were needed to confirm her words. First, Maria turned to Enrique, an old friend and colleague from the laundry. Enrique was a quiet, taciturn man with a wrinkled face and kind eyes. He had worked on Celestia Horizon longer than anyone else on the crew and knew all its secret nooks, every creek and every hidden passage. Enrique had access to technical rooms and, most importantly, to old surveillance cameras, some of which no one really checked or serviced. He had known Maria for a long time. Their families even socialized between voyages, and unlike many others, he didn't believe in her guilt for a second. His faith in her was a breath of fresh air for Maria. "If she does this regularly, she probably has a stash somewhere," Enrique said thoughtfully, wiping his glasses. "Somewhere on the ship, where she hides everything stolen. I'll help, Maria, but carefully. On a liner, language is a weapon, and suspicion spreads faster than fire. We must be very, very discreet. I can set up a camera somewhere else, where she won't expect it, and connect it to an old server. It will be difficult, but possible." Enrique, using his knowledge and access, managed to install another hidden camera above the door of the storeroom that led directly into the changing room. It was an ideal spot, providing a wide view. He worked hard, concealing wires and the miniature lens so no one would notice. Maria also approached Lena, a young waitress from Ukraine who often cleaned in the same areas where Clara worked. Lena was new to the liner, but she exuded honesty and naivety. Maria knew that Lena trusted her and didn't believe gossip. "Lena, I need your help," Maria said, lowering her voice. "This is very important. I'm sure I was framed, and I know who, but I need eyes and ears." Lena, wide-eyed, nodded. She promised to observe Clara's movements, who she interacted with, where she spent her time. To report anything strange that seemed suspicious, even if it seemed minor. Her role was crucial. She was to become an unnoticeable witness, confirming the picture. In parallel, Maria decided to provoke Clara. She deliberately left her old bag in the common changing room in a place clearly visible from Enrique's camera. The bag was half open, and the edge of an old envelope containing ordinary but rather flashy costume jewelry protruded from it. It wasn't a valuable item, but it was attractive enough to pique interest. It was bait. Maria hid around the corner, watching the changing room through the reflection in a large cleaning mirror. Her heart pounded like a trapped bird, and Clara came. At first, she just walked past, casting a quick glance at the bag. Maria almost despaired, thinking Clara wouldn't fall for it. But then Clara returned. She looked around. No one. The changing room was empty. She quickly, almost breathlessly, approached the bag. She opened it even wider, peering inside. She looked around as if listening for every rustle. Her movements were swift, but there was a nervous anticipation in them. She pulled out a small box with a ring inlaid with a fake emerald. She shrugged, as if it were just a casual action, and carried it away. This was also recorded. On the second camera, installed by Enrique above the storeroom door. The quality wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough to see Clara, her actions, and the item she took. Now Maria had not one, but two videos, two undeniable pieces of evidence made on different days, from different angles. That same evening, as the liner gently swayed on the waves, Maria delivered both files directly to the chief officer, Mr. Allen. He was known for his strictness, bordering on detachment, and his impartiality. Allen had served on liners for more than 15 years and had seen a lot. His office was austere, but it exuded an aura of order. Maria, nervously clutching the flash drive, briefly and clearly explained the situation, showed the first video on her phone, and then handed over the flash drive with the second. Allen silently watched the recordings. His face showed no emotion. He said nothing, only nodded, his gaze hardening. "Stay in touch, Maria. Be prepared to give an explanation during the official inquiry. And for now, don't tell anyone. No one. Not even your friends. Understood?" Maria nodded, feeling a huge weight lift from her shoulders. She had done all she could. Now the ball was in the captain's court. The next morning, Clara was summoned to the officer's deck. Maria saw her walking down the corridor, self-assured, as if on parade. She even smiled, casting a glance at Maria that was full of hidden malice and superiority. "Good luck to you, Masha," Clara threw, her voice full of mockery. "Soon you'll see who's right here." An hour later, Clara returned to her cabin, pale, with trembling hands. Her usually impeccable hairstyle was disheveled, and her eyes were full of horror. A security guard followed her like a shadow. His face was, as usual, inscrutable, but his presence spoke volumes. Maria watched from a distance, hidden behind a column. Clara noticed her. Their gazes met. At that moment, the mask fell. Fury, pure, unadulterated fury, distorted Clara's face. "You always got more tips," she hissed, not holding back her hatred. Her voice was low, full of spite. "Well, cry now yourself. Your life will be destroyed, just like mine." Maria did not answer. She knew. The truth had come out. And this was only the beginning. The official inquiry lasted longer than Maria expected. Every hour seemed an eternity, every minute a trial. Although the evidence was convincing, the liner's captain's counsel acted with extreme caution. The reputation of Celestia Horizon was paramount to them, and any scandal could cause irreparable damage. Captain Bennett, a massive man with piercing blue eyes and a gray beard, was known for his principles and intolerance of lies. He believed in justice, but demanded irrefutable facts. Clara denied her guilt to the very end. Her voice rang with indignation as she gave her testimony in the officers' lounge. She claimed that the recordings were fakes, a masterful montage created by envious people. She even tried to evoke sympathy, stating that it was a provocation from those who envied her success, her ease in communication, her ability to adapt quickly. Clara insisted that she found and intended to turn in the jewelry, and the clutch bag accidentally ended up in her hands while she was helping Maria clean. Her explanations were masterful, but a strain was palpable in them. But Captain Bennett was an old-school man. He didn't trust words, especially when they were so flowery and full of self-justification. He trusted facts, undeniable evidence. And the two videos, made on different days, from different angles, where Clara, clearly aware of her actions, intruded into colleagues' personal belongings, became the anchor that sank her version. Every movement of Clara's in the recording was clear and methodical, without the slightest hint of accidentalness. This was the work of an experienced thief, not just a forgetful colleague. The next day after the interrogation, officers conducted a thorough search of Clara's cabin and locker. The results were staggering. They found not only jewelry similar to that described in passenger complaints, but also a complete set of universal keys for crew lockers. Among them, exactly the same one Maria had seen in Clara's hands. This was a master key, capable of opening any staff locker. Moreover, several expensive watches and thin chains were found in her suitcase, which clearly did not correspond to her income level. These were items that Clara was likely intending to hide until arrival at port. It was officially announced Clara was suspended from service with immediate disembarkation at the nearest port, which turned out to be Gibraltar. She would be handed over to the local police, where the lost items were first reported. And for now, she would be under guard in the technical compartment, in complete isolation. The news quickly spread throughout the liner. The crew was initially shocked, then began to speak of Clara with open contempt. Many felt betrayed by her charm. Maria was informed briefly by an official letter delivered personally by the chief officer. It also stated that she was fully vindicated and could continue working on board. Moreover, the captain personally expressed his gratitude for her initiative, courage, and professionalism. The letter included a handwritten note from the captain. "Miss Maria, you have shown rare fortitude and loyalty to principles. Your place on this liner is more than deserved. Nevertheless, the feeling of justice did not bring immediate relief." Maria felt how much strength had drained away. The days spent in anxiety, the nights in fear and humiliation, all of it left a deep mark. Her eyes seemed older, and her smile more strained. Even colleagues, who now smiled at her again, invited her for coffee and apologized for their suspicions, seemed distant to her. She felt alienated from their carefree attitude, as if she had been to another world while they remained in the old one. She stood on the stern during her free hour as the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in incredible shades of orange and purple. The liner gently cut through the waves, its bow confidently moving forward, and the sun sank into the boundless horizon like a huge, fiery ball. Lena approached her, holding 2 cups of hot tea. "You should become a detective, Maria," Lena said, handing her a cup. "You saved more than just yourself." If she had stayed here another week, who knows what she would have done? Perhaps she would have framed someone else or started blackmailing people, knowing their secrets. Maria smiled faintly, sipping her tea. A bitter taste still lingered on her tongue. "I just didn't want to let someone erase my life with one key," she replied, looking at the distant horizon line. "Not to let someone destroy everything I had built for so long." The next day, Maria received a personal invitation to a reception in the officers' zone, a rare privilege for a regular crew member. She put on her best uniform, feeling a little out of place amidst the gleam of golden buttons and strict uniforms. There, Captain Bennett personally shook her hand. His gaze was full of sincere respect. "Miss Maria," he said, his voice deep and weighty, "the world stands on those who do not remain silent when silence is convenient. You have shown not only courage, but also wisdom, acting thoughtfully. We are proud to have you on our team. Your integrity is an example for all of us." He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a check for a substantial sum, a bonus for her initiative, as well as a letter of recommendation opening doors for her in any cruise company in the world. After the reception, Maria returned to her cabin, feeling exhausted, but at the same time incredibly strong. On her pillow lay a note from Lena, attached with a small magnet. Inside, a small, hand-drawn card with a message written in slightly crooked but sincere handwriting. "You are the true heroine of this voyage. Thank you for showing what true courage is." And a small, not very neat drawing. A ship cutting through the waves, and a bright star above it. And at that moment, for the first time in many weeks, when she was finally alone, Maria allowed herself to cry. These were tears not of grief, but of the tension she had endured, of the realization that it was all over, of relief, of gratitude. She cried for herself, for her sullied reputation, for the fear she had to experience. But these tears were also tears of victory, of purification. She had weathered the storm, and now she was ready to sail on.